and welcome to Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise where we stop, listen, and share. I'm Amanda, and I'll be your host for today's show. This is actually my first episode, so I am really excited, and I'm joined by Walter and Amar here today, who will be my partners in co-hosting the show.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today.
With that said, let us together warmly welcome back to the Stop Now Talk show, Dr. Lisseth London from Lisseth London Global Consulting, LLGC. Dr. London is a behavior trauma consultant and coach, speaker, human rights advocate, international psychology consultant, and traumatologist. Welcome, Dr. London. We are thrilled to have you back on the show.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here again and to see all new faces and interact with you.
Okay, so I think it's good to to jump into where we left off last time. The last time on the show, you spoke a lot about, trauma-informed approach, psychosocial, the psychosocial model, and it just seems like a good starting point for today's show.
Yeah, definitely. So the biopsychosocial spiritual model is very important tool and approach, right? It's a model that it's a requirement, I would say. It's often dismissed because people don't understand the necessity of it. Bio, the biology, psycho, the psychology, social, the social aspect of it. The spiritual model, who we are, our beliefs, what are our traditions, who we are based off of. And so in order to understand when someone is going through a traumatic experience, you have to understand and really approach it from that angle. Just because when you are traumatized and you are triggered, the thing that helps you to be resilient, the thing that helps you to move forward is often your beliefs, is often what you have been taught in the social aspect, right? Your ecosystems. And so in order for a clinician or a traumatologist or anyone or a peer to really approach anyone who has been traumatized, you have to go through the angle of understanding, well, how has the trauma affected your social? How has it affected your engagement? How has it affected your physical? How has it affected your psychological? And how has it affected your beliefs and your spiritual approach, right? Because oftentimes the things that we believe, the things that we held on to so dear, often we tend to dismiss it or lose or release it because the trauma is so much that it becomes too much. And so when you're targeting, right, or when you're, I wouldn't say targeting, but when you are really working with someone who has gone through any type of traumatic experience, whether it's a big or small, you have to go through that angle to understand the individual.
Okay. And would that include the trafficker? I know there was an interesting question in the previous recording about, how to, we spoke about how to address the trafficker who is contributing to, and sometimes, unbeknownst to them, contributing to human trafficking situations. And, post-show, we had a couple of thoughts an idea I wanted to share just for your feedback. So the idea is developing informative messaging in video and audio format to be played in commercials or radio ads that are designed to educate the trafficker in the hopes that they will disengage from being the trafficker and learn ways to make changes by being informed. What is your opinion about this approach? Is it trauma informed?
By creating a video so that it constantly play throughout like social media and TV, is that what you're asking? Yes. I do believe that hits the psychological side of the biopsychosocial, right? That hits on that side in terms of disengaging, right? Kind of like, when you go through something and you're terrified, you tend to disassociate because no one is there to kill the spider for you. You got to kill the spider yourself. And so you put your fear aside and you're like, okay, I got to do this. Oftentimes when you are this approach that you all are talking about, I think is beneficial. It will help those who are beginning to be groomed to be in that aspect. Those who have been in that in that field or in that area for a long time, I would say that it will be more difficult. It more intentional advertisement in order for that rate a little bit more. But for example, right now we are having a lot of young kids who are being groomed to be those individuals who get kids and like, hey, you want to come and be a part of this? And to be that recruiter for the trafficker. Again, that's how it begins. Oftentimes, that's how it begins. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but oftentimes that's how it begins. If they become groomed to the position that they are going to be either taken.
What is a trauma-informed environment?
Ooh, that's my favorite question. So I do a lot of training with organizations, right? So I literally go into spaces and train nonprofit, for-profit churches, just individuals, how to create a trauma-informed environment. A trauma-informed environment is you being aware that external things happen, right? We, in the workspace, in system itself, there's such a structure already that people disengage that there's a humanistic side to the structure itself. So a trauma-informed environment is basically integrating the human aspect back in, the understanding that things do happen, the understanding that, again, we have to be aware and gracious and merciful to one another, right? And to understand that the cookie cutter approach does not work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what a trauma-informed environment looks like. Really just being that.
Okay, so in regards to, trauma-informed policing, for example, do you have any insight or suggestions on how we could tackle trauma-informed policing? What would your trauma-informed approach be in this work setting?
Are you talking about in the law enforcement or just like
Yes.
these individuals? Okay, so law enforcement. That's a little bit different. So I know that there is a huge, well, for the last year or so, there was a huge push into dismantling police officing, like law enforcement in general, or integrating more trainings and all of that. And again, I think trauma-informed policing really goes back to the structure again. There has to be training in the forefront. You understand that the training in the beginning is often, how do you hold a gun? How do you detect the differences between a suspect and a criminal, or what forms or laws, right? Policies and standards, all these things, but we don't integrate the aspect of, okay, you are coming into this home and people are losing their mind and so agitated. How do you de-escalate, right? They have crisis and de-escalation courses, which is what I know, right? Because I have a lot of law enforcement friends and family members, but there is not a specific course in regards to being trauma-informed, right? There is stuff that's happening before police officers are called. How do I come in and understand that people are no longer engaging respectfully to one another because they have been triggered, because something is happening, right? So trauma-informed policing requires that in the structure, bringing the training back in the beginning, and then having I would say, like a maintenance, like where you come back and like fine tune throughout the process. I think that is something that is required. Is that realistic? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the benefits of it. I know in some places in Canada, like Toronto, in Ontario, there are police individuals who are implementing trauma-informed approaches into their systems. But again, it's not a cookie cutter approach. You have to customize as you go along.
Questions on that front, because that's something I've looked into and talked to people about. As far as, isn't that something that with all the things we ask officers to do, should that even be something they respond to in issues where it's like a wellness check or something? because I've thrown ideas around. Shouldn't we have a way where we have people who are actually trained with a background in something like that, rather than people who have guns going to answering those kind of calls, or have a team of people that answer certain calls with like a police officer there, and then once they get on scene, they decide who needs to take the front. Because I think asking a police officer to respond to certain types of wellness checks with someone who might have a mental illness is how we get incidents of people getting shot when it shouldn't happen. So is that kind of a thing that you've looked into, Dr. London?
So right now, I know a couple of states actually do implement social workers coming in to do the pre-assessment before police officers get involved, right? I know that Texas right now, especially after everything that happened in the past 2 years, have now really reinforced that. Now, the thing about it is a lot of states getting individuals to be a part of that has become very difficult. And the reason why is because of the fear that they are now going to be in the middle of that, right? So, and also you also have to consider, when we are trained as little, we are not told to call the social services. Social services has been said, oh, they come and take your kids. So having that preset in your mind that anybody that's social worker is associated with that. And police officers, they're like, if you're in danger, call 911. So we are now having to combat these two mental things that were ingrained in us since we were little, that we're saying, hey, before you call the police, call this number to help you de-escalate, to help you process that, right? That is difficult. The other thing is police officers bringing in civilians, right, who are trained, but are civilians nonetheless, they're still now having to say, okay, now I have to be responsible for the people who call 911 and these two individuals who are coming in to assess. I don't know the dangers, what will happen. So there is a lot of tension and concern about that because of that specifically. So I do agree with you that there should be more behavioral health specialists, that's what they're called, to come in and work with the police officers. But again, the variables is what the police officers are concerned about. The variables is why social services individuals are having a hard time signing up to even play that role. So I do believe that should be something, but it's different now in these 2 days before this concept even came.
Would it work better if they were kind of, I guess, maybe not badged officers, but specifically worked for the police departments? Because that does seem like something that would ease tension, so you would have different individuals in the police department responding, because it always creates, because in the United States, we're one of the few countries where officers carry around guns because we have over 200 million guns in the country. It always creates a bout of tension when someone's coming that you don't know, and they have guns on them. And I just think that would that possibly ease tensions and create a more trust that we have someone here that's trained in de-escalation, in when it comes to matters of someone is just having a bad day mentally, where they just need to be talked down and their family doesn't know how to do that. I'm just wondering, would that actually help build trust between communities and police again, so we wouldn't have the talks of like the defund or just completely wipe out the police, which wiping out police officers was never really going to happen. So I mean, so other solutions like that, is that something that you see that could help build these relationships and kind of reduce trauma in communities, especially when it comes to law enforcement?
I do believe that would be beneficial. However, in order for that to even happen, right, there has to be a conversation with the community. You have to go back to the ecosystem. The community itself has to welcome, right, invite the police and say, this is what we are looking to have. If the police invites you as a community member to come in, there already is going to be tension. There's going to be hesitation already, because what are you trying to do, right? There has to be this equal share of responsibility that comes from the community and the law enforcement. And to build this new approach, there has to be training within the community itself, so the individuals know that there is a difference, right? That they know that, hey, we are now creating this new number because as a community, as a member of this community, I'm tired of seeing A, Y, Z, right? All these things. And so because of that, we are now creating this, and we are now inviting the police officers to support us in this, but we are creating this particular. It has to come in that format, because again, if you have the police create a community training regarding this approach, again, the mistrust is already there. What are you doing? Like, is it really going to be true? Like, like you're saying that the community, there's going to be peer supports and behavioral health specialists supporting you, but why are you there? Like, are you all being trained? Is it going to be different? Like, are you coming in with guns? Like, and so all of these questions are going to come out. And so again, you have to come at it from the community sense, because the community is who is the one suffering. The community is the one that needs this. And so it has to come from that angle first, in order for it to work, and in order for us to build that relationship with the law enforcement. Does it make sense?
Yes. Are you suggesting like town halls where there's back and forth communication, or how would that directly look in your eyes?
So a committee has to be built. I think town halls is hard because a lot of people don't show up, right? Hey, we already talked about this. But if you have committee members, right, specific committee members, create this group and come up with suggestions, survey the community, talk to the community members about what it is they're looking for, what would they suggest, and build it. You have to do an internal assessment, right? Because again, if I come in and tell you, oh, I know what it feels like, and I'm going to implement this, you don't know if it's going to work because it doesn't fit my community. We can't continue doing cookie cutter things because it's not working. It has to fit and be customized to the community itself. So I can't utilize the committee and the community service and the approach that we use in Texas and Dallas or Houston with someone in Chicago. It doesn't work. The approach is different. So you have to build a committee that is aware of the ecosystem within their community and create that. Invite leaders to sit down and create an approach of how are we going to do this together. And then you invite other people in. And until you create what is a structure, then you implement. You cannot implement and then go in and say, we're going to have a town meeting to see how it's working. It doesn't work like that. We've already done it and it didn't work, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Like, we can't keep doing the same thing. We have to try to do it differently. We have to figure out how to customize in a holistic way. Well, not ignoring the ecosystem that is the community who has been hurting, who has been saying for decades and decades, hey, this is not working.
It sounds like there may need to be a development of a new job position, maybe like a law enforcement liaison to serve a link between the police department and the community. And I actually had a conversation with a chief of police who has a mental task force regarding this. And his concern was, who would pay for the salary? Is it a grant, or would it only last for a couple of years? And then would there be a reduction in force? Is it a position within law enforcement? And so there were a lot of, questions worth pondering within that conversation. Do you have any further insight from that sharing, from the sharing of my conversation with the chief of police?
Yeah, it's very difficult because everybody's concerned about funding, right? Because they already tight. So if we're going to create this position, is it going to come out of my budget? I'm already barely making salary for some of these officers, or making very salary for some of these social workers or behavioral specialists. So how do we come up with this funding? Well, it's about creating it, right? We are going to have to seek grants. We are going to have to seek sponsors to donate into this position, which is why the committee in this space is important. You have to create a structure of what it is you want in this approach. How are we wanting to target the needs of our community? okay, and what position can fit that for not only to be the liaison between the community and us, but also the police officers and us, right? And that person has to be that individual. Oftentimes, so you see, and again, I keep saying people in Canada because I've been working with a lot of people up there. They have it's called a police program coordinator, and it's a liaison, right? But though that individual has gone through the police academy, so it's still very much law enforcement with the touch of behavioral health. Does that make sense? And so it's still in the middle, which to try to justify the budget itself. So do we want something like that? I mean, that may end up happening, but if we do that, that means we're still in the same situation, right? We're still in the same thing. So it's very difficult when you're talking about budgeting and funding because of that. So there's a lot of grants in regards to how we can support the police or the community, the law enforcement, right? There's a lot of funding in regards to all these things. We just have to figure out and tailor it in order for us to be able to say, okay, we are actually targeting the need of the community by addressing the crime rate, by addressing this, right? And looking at it through the highlight parts of the grant requirements and saying how are we tailoring it to that. But again, it's very different for state. Each state is different, right? Federally, the grants are there, but again, it has to be tailored to the state to fit into the requirements and stuff. So funding is a tricky one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the recommendation was also to reach out to philanthropists, and I don't know what your opinion is about that, but what policies and procedures do you think would be helpful in implementing the trauma-informed policing across the United States, for example, like set policies and procedures throughout all 50 states? Are there certain policies and procedures that come to mind regarding the success of it?
Well, that's difficult, right? Because every state is very different, as we saw with the elections and stuff recently, right? Everything, one state is yes, one state is no. Everything is just, I'm not even going to get into that. But yes, so it's in regarding the policies and procedure, in order for you to implement a very trauma-informed approach, you have to really look at it from the behavioral aspect, right? The behavioral aspect of where we do no harm, where we actually meet the clients where they are, where we implement evidence-based procedures and approaches, right? Where we follow certain treatment plans. We have to look at that, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? Into understanding all of these things and implementing it into this very black and white policy approach from the police is very difficult, right? But again, if you have the committee who works in building the language and working into blending these things, you can create a policy in standards that will fit the role that you're wanting in this space, but also to really create maybe accountability department for such incidents that happen as well. So it's tricky again in regards to that. And to go back to your philanthropies is regarding what I mentioned in regards to like sponsors and donors. That's what I meant. Like those individuals are often the people who are sought out for sponsorship and donations.
Are you familiar or connected with campaign for trauma-informed policy and practice? It's an organization in the United States.
Are they based on DC?
I'm not sure where they're based. I led an RGB trauma-informed coalition at one time and invited them to be a guest speaker. So I spoke with them regularly. They have monthly meetings, but I don't know. I don't remember exactly where they're based from, but I think you should connect with them if you don't already know them. I'll connect you with them after this show. Because I feel like there might be something there in regards to having a large scale approach in implementing trauma-informed policing in the United States.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But also, this moving away from trauma-informed policing and kind of just having more of a bigger picture approach, what is your hope for implementing trauma-informed strategies and practices?
Strengthening the individual and the organization. That's my goal, right? I am tired. I would say this, I am tired of seeing people burn out because of the lack of trauma-informed support within the system that they were so passionate enough to say yes to. I will be a part of this organization. I'm tired of organizations not having a trauma-informed environment where they end up either losing their vision and losing their purpose because now they become more focused on the bottom line. The reason why I'm passionate about implementing a trauma-informed care approach, right, either focused or informed, is because we are one, right? We are not only a professional side, we have a personal side, and where our personal is affected, our professional it gets hurt as well. And so here we are, where we are more in the professional field. We're more in a workspace longer than we are with our own families and our loved ones. And so we are investing time and energy into an organization that sees us as replaceable. If you notice that, and because again, that is the system business was created. We want you, we're great that you're passionate, you're doing the job, and then once you get burned out, you are replaced because there is no system in place to help you, support you so that you do stay, so that you do continue to be here. And so I'm just tired that after that process, individuals leave and they're walking around hurt or trying to find another thing that they're passionate about or create a new goal within the trauma that really doesn't, like, it's for right now and doesn't really resonate to who they were, right? And so I'm just tired of seeing people in that space. So my goal is to build stronger organizations and support individuals so that they never lose their passion and vision.
One idea I had regarding that, preventing secondary trauma was, maybe providing acupuncture ear seeds to the healthcare professionals working within the trauma-informed approach. And it's simply just six points in each ear, and they're tiny little stickers, and they have a protocol for post-traumatic stress disorder to prevent or treat trauma. And it's actually was developed. It's called battlefield acupuncture and was used in war. And I've pitched the idea, and it was approved, and then it didn't make it all the way through, is what happened. And so I'm curious about your opinion on that idea. Is that something you would take and do something with it, and try and get professionals to wear these 6 points in their ear to prevent, to actually address what they're working on?
So I found it very interesting that you brought that up. So I'm actually collaborating with the Association of Acupuncturists, because one of the things that I've done for myself is I utilize acupuncture, right? As a person who deals with trauma from other clients, I have to make sure that I'm okay, right, at all times. And so I saw the benefits, and I've just been collaborating with this acupuncturist that now has put me in front of the association itself to provide training, a trauma-informed training for these professionals, because they do have some type of trauma training, but is not an in-depth understanding of the differences of trauma-informed and trauma-focused. I utilize that, the points within my self-realization, self-actualization techniques that I use within my sessions. Which is really looking at your nervous system, right? Because in order for you to regulate, in order for you to be realigned, you have to make sure that you are not in a hypersensitive state where you are unable to absorb the information. So we have to calm those nerves down. So we have to literally target these points from before we do anything, before we can even have a conversation. So I would recommend these the battlefield or the acupuncture stickers for individuals to while they're dealing with trauma or any stressful situation, because it does help regulate and bring everybody back to a baseline in order to be able to be functionable and engage in a proper way, not only for themselves but for others around them. So yes, I am a believer in acupuncture. I'm a believer in the approach that they've used to target post-traumatic stress in itself. So I'm always advocating and referring my clients to get some type of acupuncture for themselves.
In addition, there's also the NADA protocol, the National Acupuncture Detox Association protocol, and it's actually 5 needles in each year, and it addresses substance abuse and trauma. This was another idea that was written in a grant that I helped to write, made it through, and then didn't make it quite all the way through. But essentially the thought was to train healthcare professionals such as counselors, psychologists to administer the NADA protocol. I could see this being utilized in trauma-informed policing too, on scene when in the moment when the person is maybe processing the trauma that has just happened to them. I can see that being helpful and useful, but it's such I don't know if it's a taboo subject, or what the deal is, but people just cannot seem to wrap their minds around it. And to me, it's so simple. I've studied acupuncture. I went to acupuncture school, so it makes perfect sense to me. My frustration is, I guess, sounds like it's some dangerous solution to people, and it's quite the opposite. What's your opinion about that? Or would you move forward with such an initiative in your network?
I would say I would give you the pros and cons to that. So having police officers in a situation provide that is very dangerous. So, and the reason why
it wouldn't be the police officers, because you have to have a license, like a professional license, and go through the training.
But while the police officers are around, the tension itself is you are unable to control what is happening in the acupuncture space. As you know, there has to be some type of like zen and control to make sure that the client is able to find, like, where you're able to put these needles and have them really breathe through the process to regulate in that space.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, thank you for that point. That makes sense. Not having it, the NADA protocol done on scene, per se, but maybe opportunities for people to receive the NADA protocol every Saturday from 10 to 11, something like that, just integrate it into the community, and also provide the opportunities for healthcare professionals to gain another skill. And I'm just interested on your opinion about it also, because from my understanding, you kind of help prepare blueprints for organizations almost, or information about, how to move forward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it will be beneficial. I'm again going to the pros and cons, is that yes, you're training individuals to implement this. Yes, you're bringing in a professional to implement this as well. But again, is the environment. Being able to control the environment itself may be very difficult, right? In that aspect. And so having that approach, having that understanding is very important. So I do believe that if you create a space where you're training the community to do this, that's great. But then what are they going to do with that? Are they going to go around and then provide that services to their neighbors? Then how do you manage that? How do you control that? How do you do that? Make sure that that's being happened. So I can see the pros and cons of everything, right? In terms of that. And in regards to the blueprint for the organization, I do come in and create a whole approach, right? I go from the leadership roles all the way down to the frontline workers, right? We look at the process, we look at their policies, and we integrate this trauma-informed, trauma-focused within each space to really integrate that aspect of, like, there's a human need to be addressed and to be acknowledged throughout this, right? We saw a lot of organizations close their buildings because they decided they're going to go remote from now on, right? they recognized bringing in people to a building wasn't really anything. It was just causing really stress, and it was taking up a lot of money. People were still giving the same effort in their own home, in their own space, right? So people have to really look at their policies and things to see what is really working, what is not. What are we wasting our time and energy on, and what should be shifted in order for it to work? And that's basically what I go and do with individuals and organizations.
Yeah, Lisseth, I have a question to you. You know, Stop Now organization is fighting against human trafficking, racism, modern slavery, abuse. So those who are victims, you know, when they face some problem or cheated by others in their life, you know that there's those type of problems. That way they shock mentally, you know. So my question to you that how can they recover from that part or get mental support to recover their normal life?
Sorry, there's a storm coming over here, so the internet is going crazy because of the storm that's happening outside. So I apologize for that. So to address your question in regards to the victim who has gone through trafficking, and how do you implement this, right? It goes back to understanding the client. You have to meet them where they're at, right? Me coming in and implementing a biopsycho spiritual approach requires me to stop and to look at who they are now, currently, presently. There is no such thing as returning to a normal life. What is normal, right? Their normal life could have been abuse, right? So we are creating a new environment, whatever way they need it to be. We're creating a new baseline by acknowledging that where they've been, what they've experienced, but also highlighting where they want to be and who they want to be. So when we approach victims of trafficking, we have to understand that aspect. A lot of people, a lot of professionals want to make sure that we get and provide the services and training and all these things for the individual to get them back to a normal state. And unfortunately, that's actually more traumatizing and triggering than anything, because my normal space may have been great, but something happened that got me to this place. So I don't want to go there. So how do I function here? I'm a survivor here. I'm resilient here. How do I go and provide that? And so when you do a treatment with that aspect and understanding, then you go into, well, how physically are you dealing with it? Mentally, how are you processing this, right? Socially, how are you engaging, right? And spiritually, what are your beliefs? What practices are you now saying, I will never do? I will do this. I won't get myself around. So we have to look at it that way when we're looking at victims. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lisseth.
It sounds like there's a really, heavy theme of mental health, and it's such a, when you talk about it, even Dr. London, it sounds like so much to take in. Do you have, maybe like if we were to meet again, like clarity on a specific topic regarding mental health that we can just address head on, get down to the bottom of it, about how we can effectively move forward? I feel like we're kind of stuck in this. It's a lot to handle. We have to include all the psychosocial, all of the model, all four of the components of the model, and so it seems like, is there a way to make it cut and dry, I guess is my question. And would you be interested in simplifying mental health and maybe diving deeper into how we could simplify mental health, or incorporate other strategies like to improve mental health, like art engagement, for example, things of that nature, that we're already doing in our daily living? some individuals anyway that are interested in art.
Yeah,
But that's my question.
No, I thank you for your question. I think that, right, like there's a lot. What can we do? How do we approach this? I there is a need to understand that we can't really simplify mental health when it comes to trafficking, right? Understanding that itself, because if we do that, we're saying that it's a cookie cutter approach, and trafficking is not cookie cutter, right? The victims are not cookie cutter. So I get the concept, but if we do that, it dismisses a lot of the individual who is in front of us, the victims who are in front of us. There are many amazing models and evidence-based practices that we can utilize to compartmentalize, right, this topic itself. But when you get into this box of where everything has been compartmentalized, there's a lot of things that we have to address, which is the mental health, the trauma, the dual diagnosis itself, because a lot of victims have a dual diagnosis, right? There is a mental and substance abuse oftentimes that are attached to this, right? And a lot of destructive behaviors that we have to address again. And once you get to the bottom of that iceberg, right, it usually is having to deal with some type of self image or depression or, an attachment disorder, right? Understanding the ACEs, right? The ACEs, the 3 realms of ACEs, right? Understanding that there is looking at the trauma from the household environment and community aspect on how that impacted this individual in front of us. So I get that we want to, that may be better to do, but if we do so, we are going to be doing a disservice to those that we're trying to treat because of how diverse they are, right? Because, this modern day slavery can be trafficked sexually, labor can be trafficked, in just exploitation itself, right? And there's so many layers to this that compartmentalizing that is often difficult to do.
That's definitely something I would be interested in talking to you more about in the future, because especially when it comes to trafficking and different aspects of it, I think that's something that is not spoken about enough, especially when it comes down to getting attention out there on it and the actual victims and everything. So I would love to speak to you about that more in the future.
Sounds great.
So is it this idea that, the more we talk about it, the more others will understand? And so these in-depth conversations and are actually, helpful more than we may even realize in the moment for others listening, etc. Is that kind of the understanding too that you were trying to convey? Yes,
definitely. I think the first time that I came on this show, I spoke about one of the organizations that I provide support for is in Houston, and it was created by this a victim, a survivor, and so she basically goes to the streets of Houston, which is one of the largest streets, right, in the state, where there's a lot of trafficking happening, right? A lot of prostitution, right? They say prostitution, but it's really trafficking. A lot of exploitation happening. That's where she came from, right? She had a son by her trafficker, right? All these things. She's very vocal about this. And so she goes in, and so we started having conversations about, her story, what the history of trafficking, the approach to dealing with treatment, how the treatment worked for her, what worked, what didn't work, what she expected, what support she needed, what support she really didn't care for. And as we're having these conversations and working with her, she was able to share her stories and share our conversations to other individuals, say, oh, that's what I experienced. Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know that that's what it was. Right. And so by conversations, having discussions, we are taking down this mystic topic, right? Because if you tell a lot of people, oh, trafficking is modern day slavery, people are like, oh, okay. Not everyone knows, right? Because again, the conversation needs to be continued. Things have to be continue to be broken down to address that trafficking is this, right? Like, 2 weeks ago, that young lady sends me a message, hey, my trafficker just got arrested by the FBI. She has been wanting to get her trafficker arrested for 8 years. 8 years she has been talking to the FBI. She has been working with the law enforcement for 8 years. Her son is 10 now. For 8 years, she has been working, and they just arrested him, right? Because he had multiple ladies, but they couldn't create it. They were trying to collect evidence to create that case so it can stick. So having that conversation help other individuals say, I know you want to go against your trafficker and have them arrested, but there's a process too. And so for those individuals to understand that, yes, it's okay to leave, but yes, we're going to continue with this case. This case might take longer, but you have to hold on and stay strong. That conversation helped a lot of women and men, because I deal with a lot of men victims as well, understand what trafficking, in the process of trafficking, in the laws against trafficking. So yes, conversation like this is very important, right? Getting into the forefront are very important, because a lot of the new generations don't know. They don't know these things, right? Older generations don't even know that getting into a car and having your door open while you're coming in and putting your purse on the side can actually be very dangerous, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's the case of trafficking, but I'm just saying that it can be very dangerous. And they just look at you like, but I'm getting into the car. That's just how I do it, you know? And I was like, I get it. But now that's usually used to kidnap people, to traffic people. And so having that conversation was very hard for the older generation to even understand that. So yeah, conversation is key.
Okay. Yes. And you're absolutely right. I think we do need to continue this conversation as often as we possibly can. And hopefully we can meet again soon. We will be in touch with you all. Thank you again, Dr. London, for coming by and visiting us at Stop Now. It was great catching up, and we hope to see you again soon. Say our goodbyes from Stop Now. I don't know if anybody else has any last comments from the Stop Now team. Lisseth, London, thank you so much again for joining us for this wonderful conversation. Always, always insightful speaking with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you all.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Bye-bye. Please don't forget to like, subscribe to our video, and turn the notification bell on to receive notifications of the next live session.